All right, well, good morning. Welcome to session 3 as we continue our End of Life Planning series. And so I hope this has been fruitful and productive for you and very informative as you start to think through those things that we can take care of today. And much of what we're going to deal with today, although looking at a lot of the things that happen post-life, are still in the planning phase. And so I still want you to keep your planning mindset in place, but then we'll also talk about a few things that need to happen in case of emergency. So let's talk a little bit about the structure that I want to accomplish for today, and it's four things. It's not that simple. It'll take a little bit, but four points that we'll work through today. And the first one, starting with who to call in case of emergency. Like I said, some of you have dealt with this before. Some of you have been involved in situations where someone passes away in front of you, sometimes even unexpectedly, and you need to know what to do. A lot of people don't know what to do in those situations. Obviously, the first thing would be call 911, but I want to talk through what to do in case of an emergency that happens in front of you. If you're around, you are equipped with how to handle that. And then we'll get back to more of our planning session of it and think about decisions with the body, right? What to do with your body, what to do with the body of your loved one in those decisions that you are making, and how we can wisely think about it and think about a way that would be pleasing to the Lord. And then the last two sections of this will be dealing with mortuaries. There's a lot that happens within the funeral homes, mortuaries, that you need to know beforehand, and all the things that you're going to get just overwhelmed with, for lack of better words. And it's always great to know these things beforehand, right? Instead of trying to deal with these in a moment of grief and a lot of other things that you're having to deal with, making these big decisions, it's good for us to think about them now, start to make plans for them now, because there's another thing called inflation that seems to not go away, that's continuing to happen in the funeral side of things as well, too. And so thinking about those things now, for later. And then last part of it is dealing with cemeteries. So that's going to be our checklist for this morning that we're going to work through. But the first one that I want to talk through is when death occurs. And so this, again, is an emergency. If something happens around you, someone that dies around you, what should you do? And the first step is we got to get a legal pronouncement of death. That's the first step that needs to happen. That's the first big major section of this, and I want to break it down in two sections because when we think about a legal pronouncement of death, death could happen unexpectedly, or it could happen, where you see it coming. And so let's talk about unexpected death first. And so if you think about the steps that need to happen with unexpected death, I've already alluded to that, is the first thing you need to do, of course, is call 911, right? Something happens to someone around you, you believe that they are severely ill or hurt or harmed or even possibly dead, call 911. That needs to be your first step. 911 is going to take you, if the person is dead, to connect you with the coroner's office. And so most of the times they'll directly connect you to the coroner's office, or you may have to do that. The coroner's office, the responsibility of a coroner is to positively identify the deceased and to take care of the belongings and to investigate the scene if necessary, depending on how the death occurred. And so the coroner's office will come out and take care of a lot of things with the deceased during that time. And then from that point in time, there's a laundry list of people to contact, but I would say you need to contact your church, contact your closest family members, right? Your pastors want to be involved in these situations to help you through it. There's a lot that you're going through, and so that should be one of the first calls that you make to your church family, and then also to your family that is closest near you, or friends if family members are not around. So that's the situation, again, if it happens unexpectedly. But a lot of times these happen in the context of one being in the hospital or hospice care. And that is slightly different because many of these things are taken care of for you, right? You don't need to call 911 because they're there, right? You have a medical professional on hand if under hospice care oftentimes, or if you're in the hospital, then you have a lot of professionals around you. They're going to contact the coroner's office. They're going to take care of those details for you. But you still, at that point in time, need to contact your church and closest family that you have around and let them know what is going on. From that standpoint, now it's the mortuary, and we'll get into more detail here in a second about the mortuary, but that's who you would need to contact. You should be thinking about your local mortuaries. All of you should know who our local mortuaries are, and if something were to happen to you or a loved one, what funeral home is going to take care of the body. The mortuary receives the body from the coroner's office, and they begin taking it from there, getting into the next steps in this process. So receives the body, prepares it for next steps. One part of that receiving is embalming, and that's something you'll need to know right away. Is my loved one's body going to be embalmed? Embalmed is where they fill you with fluids to preserve the body, to disinfect the body, and to restore it for viewing purposes. Or, again, if there's some investigation needed, then embalming will happen. You talk to one of your Jewish friends, they're going to say, we don't do that, right? So in Judaism, they will not embalm, right? And so as soon as a Jewish person dies, then they are looking to get them in the ground as soon as they can, right? They don't believe in embalming because they want the natural decomposition of the body to take place and get into the ground as soon as possible. But embalming is not a bad thing, and oftentimes if you want to have the viewing of the body, then you need to get embalmed. You can waive that and sign something to say that no embalming will happen, but oftentimes that is part of the process. But that's just something, we'll talk about that more in a second, but that's just something you need to know right away, because that needs to happen or not happen right away. And so those are things we need to think about early. All right, let's talk about some documents, because again, we focused a lot on documents last week as well, but here's some things that you need to locate as you're preparing to deal with the various situations that are going to happen when emergencies happen. So a lot of things, or a lot of documents that you need to have on hand or have in a safe place, a blue binder, whatever you put it in, are wills, trusts, advanced health care directives. There's another one, durable power of attorney for health care. Again, you need to be able to have the documentation to say, on behalf of this person, I can make these decisions, and that needs to be in writing. Otherwise, it's going to be hard for you to make decisions depending on the relationship with the one that you are caring for. Other documents, pre-planned funeral arrangements, right? If we're talking as we are now and you've planned through the funeral arrangements that you'd like to have and all of the things that you'd like to have for end of life, then it'd be good to find that document to work through that as the questions come up. Social Security card and number, great thing. Marriage license, citizenship papers, disability and pension claims, veterans, if you were active duty in the military, Veterans Honorable Discharge Certificate, and then last one I'll put up here is cemetery paperwork, right? Those are the big documents that would be good for you to have on hand, good for you to have in a place where it's all together, because when death occurs, again, in an emergency situation or when you're dealing with the mortuary, these are a lot of the documents that you're going to need to have, and so it's good to keep those handy in a safe space where you know where they all are. That would be good in regards to preparation. Here's just a list of people to notify. There's a lot to notify on here, right? Church, I already talked about that. The employer of your deceased, to talk through the benefits and final wages. Here's a big one that most people don't think about that needs to happen sooner rather than later is your banks, right? Your credit card companies, accountants. Here's why. Anybody ever got any of those scam calls or spam calls and people call you and say, hey, I'm your long-lost Uncle Eddie, and I need help. I need a gift card. Can you send it to me? Or, you know what, this is, I got one the other day. You've been driving on the tollway, and you are overdue on toll fees, and you need to pay me now. And I'm like, dude, I haven't even driven a tollway. What are you talking about? But scammers go after the deceased. Again, they have no moral compass. They're not looking at it like, oh, that's probably too far. No, they will go that far. And you need to understand that, because they will prey upon people that are grieving. They will see somebody's name in the obituary, and they will go try to find information about that person. And what will they do? They'll try to prey on you and say, you need this life insurance, or Here's all the debt that your loved one owed, and you may not have known this, but if you don't pay this now, you will go to jail. And people start throwing out money because they're scared and they're overwhelmed. They're not thinking right. Identity theft happens all the time with recently deceased people. And so fake debt collection, I mentioned that, or insurance, fraudulent account access, all these ways they will try to find out how they can get in and take advantage of you not being in a normal state of mind because you're dealing with grief or a loved one that has just passed away. So bank, credit card companies, executive of estate, right, Social Security to stop payments, veterans, I mentioned that, insurance, doctors, automobile insurance, landlords, utility companies, Medi-Cal, and other agencies. All of those are just good. Again, as we think about a checklist, going through to say, hey, have we notified all of these people to make sure that they understand that a loved one has passed away and they can stop any type of further transactions or distribution of finances in any way. Okay? Who to notify? All right. That wasn't too bad. That was our first section, who to call. Okay? These next sections get a little bit more thicker. Wisely thinking through the body. Decisions with the body. I hear this often, and it's not a good response, but when I ask people what's going to happen with their body, sometimes I'll get people to say, oh, I don't care, I'm not here, do whatever, right? It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter, and I want to challenge that thought because it does matter. It may not matter for you because you're not here, although it does matter for you, but you oftentimes have to think about those loved ones that you're leaving behind. Your negligence with what happens with your body will impact your loved ones, right? You should wisely think about them. You should wisely, first and foremost, think about what does this look like me standing before God? Would he be pleased with my decision, or am I just making decisions based on my comforts? All right, and so we need to wisely think about decisions with the body. And here's how I know that this isn't really the true thought of people when they say, well, I don't care what happens to my body, because you do care. You do care. Let's just paint this scenario. Let's just say University of Hawaii was doing an anatomy project in their class, and they said, you know what, we're going to take a whole bunch of bodies, and we're going to cut them up, and we're going to throw them in the volcano, in lava, and we want to see how long it takes the body to burn in lava. And we want to use your body, because you don't care. We want to use your body. We want to throw it in the volcano. It's just a story. The University of Hawaii is not doing this. If you're in ABF, you know I get creative with stuff, and so I just put their logo on there, but don't call them or don't complain that they're doing this. This is a story. I should make that disclaimer. I don't want anybody. So anyway, yeah, let's just say this. Let's just say it, right? They're going to take your body, and they're going to throw it in the volcano, and they're going to let it burn in lava, and they want to see how quick it burns. Would you be okay with that? Would you sign off saying, yeah, throw my body in lava? I don't think you would. Chop my body up. Right? Feed it to the wolves. I don't think you would. Why? Because you do care about your body. You don't want just anything happening to your body. And so there is some sort of care that you have for your body. And the Bible tells us we should care about our bodies, right? Because this is God's gift to us, right? 1 Corinthians 6:19-20. Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, from whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you were bought with a price, so glorify God in your body. I understand your soul is not in your body, but we, as we're thinking about our body now, should wisely think about these decisions that we're looking to make and say, how can I glorify God with what I do with my body? And so wherever that leads you, there's more conversation there, but we shouldn't be so quick to say, too expensive. Do the cheapest route. You don't think that way about everything else in life. You shouldn't allow your loved ones to have to suffer through that of your thinking of like, I'll just do whatever, because it's going to impact them. It impacts more than just you. But the main thing that you get, the two questions are, is it burial or cremation? Right? Those are really the two. Like when you deal with any mortuaries, those are the two big buckets that you can choose between, burial and cremation. And I don't have time to go through all of it right now, but I will mention some deeper study material that you can look at. I did an hour teaching specifically on burial versus cremation. Some of you were here for it, right in ABF, but it gives you more detail than I'm going to be able to go into today. And so it talks through all of the things that we should consider between the two of them. And so you can access that by going to our ABF page through the Compass website, and then at the bottom under the series that I run through called Biblically Dealing With, it's down there. You can find it and watch that. Also, Pastor Mike, of course, in his book, the 10th chapter on 10 mistakes people make about heaven, hell, and the afterlife, the whole 10th chapter is about thinking about burial versus cremation. And so as I say that, some of you are like, well, a loved one that I have was cremated, okay? And not here to bash, say, oh, that was the horrible decision. That was bad. You shouldn't have done that. That's not my point in making this. My point in making this is we need to wisely consider what we're doing. And we need to factor in not just, well, it doesn't matter to me, but what would God want me to do? What sacrifices would he want me to make in order that I may glorify God in my body and even with my body that remains beyond when I'm in heaven? But because most people will select cremation based on price point, I want to walk you through what the cremation process looks like. Because I would say 75% of people, when they select cremation, they have no idea. They just see a person, and then they see an urn, and they say, that's cute, right? That's neat. They can just put it upon my fireplace, right? But that's not the process. You got to know the process if this is the decision that you're going to make, right? And so meet Jonathan Smith. Again, this is a made-up person. But Jonathan Smith, of course, passed away, and now he's in an urn. He's sitting on somebody's, fireplace mantle. And so you think, wow, that's nice. You have your loved one right there in the middle of your living room. But the question is, how did he get there? Because he was in bodily form before he wasn't just stuffed in that urn, right? Something had to happen. So let me tell you that process of what happens during cremation. So cremation, of course, body, you passed away, and the body is placed into a cremation container. From that cremation container, it enters into this chamber. That's the next step, called a retort. Retort is the name of that big silver chamber. And what happens in that retort is there's flames, and it's heated up to 15,000 to 2,000 degrees. Now, let me put that in context for you, because sometimes we can be here in California, and we're soft when it comes to weather. I can speak for myself. I am. When it gets up to 90 degrees, I'm like, I'm going to die out here. It's so hot outside. It's so hot outside. I can't take it, right? You know what the hottest day on earth was ever recorded? It was in Death Valley. It's 134 degrees. So I can imagine that was brutal. But that's 134 degrees. Well, let's just think about your oven, right? You go bake. You can crank your oven up high as it goes. Your oven probably only gets to 500, maybe 550. You ever open up the oven when it's at 500? It's like, whoa, that's hot in there, right? But that's only 500 degrees, right? We're not even close to it. You got a gas fireplace in your house? Right? The gas fireplace only gets up to 1,000 degrees. Right? You wouldn't stick your hand in that, right? That'd be pretty hot. It's only 1,000 degrees. The reason I use that hot lava illustration is because that's about the temperature that this gets. Hot lava gets anywhere from 1,650 degrees to 2,000 degrees. This retort is right there, right? 1,500 to 2,000 degrees. It's hot. So they take that container, that box, and they put the body in there for 2.5 to 3.5 hours until it comes out left with bone fragments and ash. And so this is what returns out after 2.5, 3 hours of that. Well, that's not it, because that still won't fit in an urn either. And so the tray is moved into a processing room, and then they take this metal magnet, and then they take out the metal pieces. So you had hip replacements, knee replacements, all those things, and so that has to come out, right? That can't get grinded down. And so they pull all of those things out, and then that's not it. They put in what's called a cremulator, right? This looks like a blender. It is a blender, right? They put the rest of the bones and the fragments in this blender, and they spin it and chop it up into fine dust until it gets down to about 5 to 7 pounds of dust. And then at that point, you can get into the urn, okay? So when I talk about cutting up a body, and you'd be like, I wouldn't want my body being fed to wolves. I wouldn't want it to be cut. That's what you're doing with cremation. They're just not going to show you that, right? But you're tearing apart the body. And so that's why, from a standpoint of thinking about cremation, is, am I really okay with that happening? Yeah, I can close my eyes and plug my ears and say, why did Pastor Kellen tell me that? I'd rather not known that information and did it blindly. Well, I don't want you to make a decision blindly. I want you to be informed. I want you to know the process and know all the details before you just sign on the line and say, hey, this is what I want to happen. As Christians, we should ask ourselves, what does the Bible have to say? Well, the Bible doesn't give us anything explicit on what to do with the body. It doesn't say thou shalt not cremate or thou shalt bury. It doesn't say that. But what we can look at is the biblical pattern of dealing with the body. And the Bible is very clear on that, from the Old Testament all the way to the New Testament. And so let me start with cremation, because the body's burned a couple times in the Bible that you should know about. Saul's remains are burned, but if you remember, Saul was caught by the Philistines, and his head was chopped off, and he was taken, his body was fastened to the wall, and it was up there almost as a trophy. Well, these men had to go in because they cared so much about the body. They stole the body, and because the body was mutilated and just completely destroyed, they made the decision to burn the body, right, and bury the bones. The body was burned there, but I can imagine the body was just in horrible shape. So that's the decision that was made. You look at the burning of the body in Amos, the book of Amos, chapter 2, verse 3. What's the context of this? Well, God is putting judgment upon Moab for burning bodies. That's the context of it. God is judging Moab because of burning of bodies. And so those are the two instances that we see in Scripture about burning of the body, right? Cremation, that's happening. But what does the Bible say about burial? It's an honorable thing to do, and we see it all throughout Scripture, right? We just read this in Genesis. Sarah was buried, right? Sarah was buried in the land of Canaan before they settled there. Abraham goes up and buys this plot of land from the Hittites, and he buries Sarah there, right? You see Rachel there. Joseph, even his body at the end of Genesis 50, his body is taken. He says, I'm going to be here in Egypt, but take me out of Egypt, right? Take me out, take my bones out and bury me somewhere. And so his bones are taken out, and he's buried in Joshua, or in the book of Joshua. We finally see it in Joshua 24. He's buried there. Moses is. And then we get all the way down to Samuel and David and even John the Baptist. We read that today in your DBR if you were reading, right? John the Baptist had his head chopped off. Well, guess what? His body was buried. His body was buried. Right? Lazarus, Stephen, after he was stoned to death, and then most importantly, of course, out of all of them we can look at, and Jesus was buried, right? Jesus was buried. Joseph of Arimathea buried Jesus in his tomb. And so we see this pattern happening all throughout Scripture. And so if you are one that is reading God's Word and saying, hey, what would be pleasing to the Lord? What would be pleasing to the Lord to do what the Bible patterns throughout Scripture? That would be a great thing to do. I know there's finances and all that stuff in there, but again, you make sacrifices and adjustments for things that matter to you in life. I'm just saying this should be something that should matter to you. All right, wisely thinking through the body. Let's think about dealing with mortuaries. Let's go there. When it comes with dealing with mortuaries, here are local recommendations that we have. These are ones that we've worked with closely here at Compass. These are not all of them. Of course, there's other mortuaries, but again, I want to be able to give you some options to be able to think through and choose from, depending on where you're going to be buried, right? If you're buried here, then these are options that we have worked with, and they do a good job. If you're going to be buried somewhere else, then you need to find a local mortuary that can handle the body there. Let me talk about dealing with mortuaries, because there's a lot of preparation that you need to have going into a mortuary, dealing with them. While they are kind and they are considerate and they try to come alongside of you, there's a lot you need to think about. And the first part is thinking about it mentally, because you need to understand it is a business. Make no mistake about it. It is a for-profit business. And so there may be some upselling. Most of the time when I've sat in these rooms with a family that's grieving and watched them interact with whomever the local mortuary is, they don't overdo it, but I can't speak for every single mortuary out there. But you got to be prepared, because they got numbers that they need to hit, right? There's always an upsell that could be there. And you are oftentimes in a state of grieving during this, and sometimes you may be like, hey, I want the best. I want the highest of the highest, and that's not in your budget to do. And they're not looking at your budget. They're just saying, hey, we have this to offer. You want that? I have this to offer. You want that? I got something better to offer. And so you got to consider mentally that it is a business. And so how can you prepare yourself for that is to know what you want beforehand. All right? As your pastors, your church family here, we deal with this all the time. And so a good thing, a good step to take is to say, hey, what are some of the things that I'm going to be dealing with, right? I can give you many of the mortuaries, the pricings, and you can go online and actually see many of the pricing that they have online. That way you familiarize yourself with some of the things that you're going to have to answer. You don't have to answer it in that moment, but you know beforehand what type of ceremony do you want to have? What type of casket options are you thinking about? Where are they going to be? The cemetery, where they're going to be buried? What, embalming, is that going to happen? Is there going to be visitation? All of those things you want to think about beforehand. That way you can go in and have answers before or as you walk through this process. Take someone with you. I can't say this enough, especially if you have lost a loved one, a spouse, a child, whatever it is. Going in there by yourself, it's not a great option to do. Again, you're going through a lot to make these big, heavy decisions when you are grieving, when you are going through what you're going through mentally, physically, spiritually. All of those, it's just not a great thing to be by yourself. And so it's always great. Again, I've gone in and I'll sit in the room with the family, and I'm not there to do anything other than listen and just make sure that we're making some wise decisions, and have no problem asking the mortuary person to step out so we can have a conversation, but you need to have somebody in there that can take control and at least look at it from a more reasonable standpoint and help you with those decisions. The biggest thing you can remember, though, is you don't have to make any decision in that moment. Right? You don't need to make a decision. They may say, hey, it'd be good to do this today, and you can say, I'm not going to do it today. I need to go home. I need to talk to a few people. I need to talk to my family. I need to talk to my pastor. I need to talk to my church family. I need to talk to some people before I make this decision. I need to go figure out what other people have done in this situation. You don't have to make a decision. They may try to pressure you there. Again, I'm speaking just in general terms. The ones that I've been with, I haven't seen this, but I can't speak for all of them. I want you to be prepared. You don't have to make a decision in that moment. That's the mental side of it. You also have to think about the practical side of it. And the biggest question you need to figure out going in there is, what is your budget? What is your budget going to be? Create a budget and think about, what am I willing to spend on a casket? What am I willing to spend on floral arrangement? What am I willing to spend on any of the services that they provide? What's your budget? Because you can easily go in there. It's like me going to Costco. I'm like, I need one thing. How did I get 10, right? Everything looks good, and you're like, I want it. That seems like that'd be right, and they're like, yeah, it's good. Most people do buy this, and you're like, well, I want to be like, most people. I guess I'll buy it too. But that might not be in your budget. You need to know your budget ahead of time to say, this is what I can't exceed, and it's best just to say, here's my budget. What can fit within this? That's a better approach to take, as opposed to looking at the cheesecake menu style options that they have at most of these mortuaries. One of the first questions you're going to have to answer is, same thing we talked about before, burial or cremation, is casket or urn. Casket or urn. And assuming many of you will pick casket, I'll stick with the casket side of it. There's a lot of casket options. Are you going to go in-house? Are you going to go third party? And they got a ton. I mean, I don't know if you can see the pricing up there, not quite, but I mean, as low as, and again, this is from O'Connor. This is online. You can see it at O'Connor Mortuary. But they can go as low as $1,425, and sometimes they're willing to even cut that. That's the retail price. Or you can go as high as $8,000, and even higher than that. You can get up to $15,000 with a casket. I wouldn't recommend that, right? Again, this is something you should spend wisely on, but I would never say break the bank on the casket, right? Choose your casket, but don't just say, well, I'll put them in an Amazon box. I don't care. Like you should care, right? We got to have some care and concern, but at the same time, it's not something we break the bank on. So a lot of those happen in-house, right? And the benefit with in-house is to be able to say, hey, in-house, everything stays here, right? The casket is here. They're dealing with the body here. The transportation is coming from here. Everything is here. Once you go third party, then you're dealing with other variables that it may not work out well. Maybe the casket that gets sent in is the wrong color. Maybe it's damaged. Maybe it doesn't get there in time. So now we're adding other variables to the situation that could not be as beneficial for you. So there is a benefit to going in-house, although you may be able to find something cheaper outside. But even in-house, they can work with you on those things. But Costco has caskets, right? Seriously. we recommend people checking out Costco. Costco has everything, man. It's great. It's not about Costco, but yeah. Here are the caskets, right? And there's the pricing. You see it's 1,100 range. But again, you look at that and you say, wow, 1,100 looks a little cheaper. But what if it comes damaged? What if there's a delay in the shipping? What if it's not the right one you selected? They, sent the wrong one. You add in all of those factors by using a third party. But there's always other options than just dealing with in-house. And either or, I've seen families use in-house and it worked out great. I've seen families use Costco and it worked out great. So it's more of your preference and what you feel comfortable with is the options. But we will typically recommend check out Costco, check online there, and then consider what they have in-house because it's just easier to deal with. It's one person as opposed to multiple people. Other things that you need to be prepared for the meeting, right? They're going to ask for clothing and undergarments. Like you have to provide those things. And so being able to have that big question is how many death certificates? So when you think about the death certificates, you need to have this in order to continue to do a lot of the things regarding the deceased, the decedent, right? Anything with medical, right? Anything with insurance, anything with your deeds and titles and all those things, you got to have a death certificate. They're not going to just hear you say, hey, my loved one passed away and say, okay, legally they can't. They got to have the death certificate. And so it's important that you obtain death certificates and know how many. I always recommend 5 to 10, right? They cost $24 per death certificate. That's an Orange County or price point. It's not per mortuary, but $24, but get 5 to 10 of them. It's always good to have, and you can always go back and get more. And the benefit of COVID, if there are a few, is now on this side of it, a lot of companies are taking scanned versions of it, right? They don't necessarily need to have the physical copy that they have to take from you, but it's always good to get 5 to 10 death certificates. That's a huge thing. It doesn't sound that big of a deal, but that's huge that you have those death certificates in your possession as you continue to work through a lot of the things that you're going to need to do dealing with the death of your loved one. Other one is they're going to ask you about pallbearers. How many pallbearers do you want, right? These pallbearers are the ones that are carrying the caskets or transporting the casket, typically from the hearse to the burial site, or they bring it into the funeral, wherever they're moving the casket, that's what the pallbearers are doing. So you want to know that ahead of time, who is going to be your designated pallbearers. More from the practical side of it, you got to think about transportation, right? The hearse, right? If you're dealing with transporting the body, even if it's from the mortuary, the funeral home, to the cemetery, somebody's got to take it there, right? Can't call Uber or anything like that. You got to have it taken there by a hearse. I'm sure they might have that sooner or later, but a hearse has to transport it there. And so that is locally, right? Where are they going to take the body? Are they taking it to a church? Are they taking it to a place? Where are they taking the body? You need to know that. And then also there's the out of state. Well, if you die here, but you say, hey, I want to be buried in Texas near whomever it is, well, now we got to factor in, we got to get the body there. And that costs, that's going to raise your cost a lot to get the body there. But that's something you got to consider. Even if you have a spot here, right? And God takes you somewhere else, another state, well, you got to get the body back here. And so those are things that you got to factor in. Where is your plot? Where are you going to be buried? And where are you living now? Because that can add into the cost. What services, right? Are you doing a funeral? Funeral, again, what we talked about is the body is present. Are you doing a memorial where the body is not present, but same run of show for the most part? Interment is a graveside service. Are you having a graveside service as part of all of this as well? You need to think about those things beforehand. When will it happen? Where will it happen? Who will officiate it? What services will you need, right? Are you going to have visitation hours, or are you going to have somebody, do they need to print all the programs? Is there going to be a video montage, or do they need to provide ushers? All of those things you have to think about. here at Compass, not all of them, but a lot of these things we try to take care of for our highly committed participants, right? Somebody passes away, we want to take care of the video montage. The printing that happens, we want to take care of that. Also, there's a lot of things, again, having those conversations, but you need to know what services that you need to think through and that you want. Another big one is floral arrangements. People don't think about that, but that's a big endeavor too. Like, who is going to do the floral arrangement? We have a handful of people here at Compass that we recommend. They do a lot of the work around here. They are part of our church, but if you're not here, then the floral arrangements, that's going to cost, and you're going to need to know that beforehand. Those are services that the mortuary might have a resource for you, or maybe they even can have somebody in-house that provides that, but those are things you're going to need to answer. And then, obviously, what cemetery, where is the body going? Because it can't stay there. So where is the body going to go? Where are you being buried? And a great question to ask is, veteran. Are you a veteran? Because there's a lot of benefits with being a veteran, right, that are great to know, and it is very helpful to know that ahead of time. Let's talk about that for a little bit. Who is eligible when we say veterans? Veterans that are honorably discharged, right? If you were dishonorable discharged, it doesn't apply to you, or separated from active duty and completed the required period of service. Armed forces members who die on active duty, spouses and dependent children. When we talk about cemeteries here in a little bit, there are specific cemeteries. We have 2 in SoCal, one out in Riverside, another one down in San Diego, which I'll mention here in a little bit. VA cemeteries, right? You don't have to look at El Toro and say it's filling up, because you have a designated spot in the National Cemetery or VA cemeteries. Headstone markers, we'll talk about that in a little bit too, but they provide that, right? It is a unique marker and headstone that they provide for all of the veterans. But it's not that they give you the money up front. It's important to know that, right? It goes through an application process, right? It has to be reimbursed up to certain amounts on different sections in the process, but it's not paid automatically. So don't think like, I'm a veteran, I can just go get a $20,000 casket, I can do whatever I want to. You got to submit it in for reimbursements. Other things that happen is a burial flag, and so the VA will provide an American flag if you've been to any veteran service that will drape over, and then they'll take that draped flag, they'll fold it, and then they will give that to the spouse or closest next to kin at the end. And then obviously a presidential memorial certificate as well. Again, all these details, most of the mortuaries, I pulled this from O'Connor, will provide this, and they tell you a lot of these details, but I want to share it with you here as we're going through the planning process, and you're thinking about what that looks like specifically for you. And a lot of other things, you can contact the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, and they can give you plenty of detail about the benefits of being a veteran and thinking about mortuaries, burials, and all of those end-of-life planning things. All right, let's deal with the last section of this, dealing with cemeteries. So cemeteries are running low, for lack of better words, around here. Currently, in Orange County, we have 3. El Toro, which is the one that is closest to us, the one that we deal with the most. Santa Ana also has a cemetery. Anaheim has a cemetery right now. And I mentioned those national cemeteries, right? Miramar is down there in San Diego, and then Riverside. Been out to both of those within the last 18 months, and that's where if you have a loved one as a veteran passes away here, one of those 2 places will be able to have them buried there. But here's the problem. You want to know the current status of these? Full. Almost full. Almost full. It's a problem, right? So here's the thing. With Anaheim Cemetery, there's no options there. You can't, it's full. It's there, you see it, and you can go online and see it, but you can't be buried there. Santa Ana is almost full. El Toro Memorial Park, almost full. Called both of them this week just to figure out what that almost full actually means. Here's the latest with Santa Ana Cemetery. If you go online right now, they are full, but they're doing construction to add 3 roads within Santa Ana Cemetery, which is going to open up about 500 spots right in Santa Ana. Well, some of you are like, I don't want to go to Santa Ana. I'm just letting you know what's near, right? 500 spots coming in Santa Ana Cemetery. El Toro Memorial Park has 400 to 450 spots remaining. And so if you try to pre-plan and say, hey, I want to buy a plot early, you can't do it with these public cemeteries because they won't allow it. When they were doing pre-planning, they would book up anywhere from 100 and 125 per month because you have pre-planning and then you have the immediate need. Somebody actually dies, we need that too. Well, while they have moved away from pre-planning and they're only taking immediate need, that slows the process down to 25 to 30 plots being taken a month. And so that's allowing them to prolong this period of how long can we go until we're completely full. So that's why you can only bury with an immediate need, or you can only contact them and get a plot with an immediate need. Somebody has died, and then you can do it. No more pre-purchasing. Even with the national cemeteries, there were 2 more that were here. There was another one down in San Diego. There was another in Los Angeles, completely full. Right, and so I didn't give them as options because they're no longer available, even with immediate burials. There is something to know, the secondary market that's out there, and a few of you have mentioned that to me and that you've utilized that. What I mean by that is Craigslist, eBay. People sometimes, because they move out of state and they go somewhere else and they have this plot, that they're like, I don't need it anymore, I'll put it out there. A lot of people will go right back to El Toro or go right back to wherever, and then they'll go to the next person on their waiting list. But some people will just go on eBay or Craigslist and they'll sell it. And so if you're looking for a plot, then that's a place. It's not guaranteed. Again, I was just checking on there just to see if I would see one pop up, and nothing popped up for El Toro in the last few weeks. And so it's not like it's always available, but if you check on there every once in a while, maybe there's one on there if you're looking to get in one of those places. But the good part in this, although it will take a while, is there's a new one coming, Gypsum Canyon in Memorial Park, which is in Anaheim Hills. The problem with that is it's not going to be here until 2029. Right now, they're going through a lawsuit with the city, and they're hoping that lawsuit will end in 2026. That will start the construction phase in Anaheim Hills. And you could actually call El Toro right now and get on a wait list for Gypsum Canyon today. You can do that this week and say, put me on a wait list. Nothing happens then other than they just write your name down. But once they start construction in 2026, which they're hoping to do, then they'll start working through that waiting list and then accepting payments to contractually have it as your plot that you have reserved. So that's coming, but the answer right now is the public cemeteries are filling up. So your question might be, well, what in the world do I do if somebody dies during those times, if it gets full and we can't do anything? Well, you still have the private cemetery sector. Right? These are a list of the private cemeteries that I wrote down just so you can have all across Orange County. Pacific View Memorial Park. Yeah, that won't be for many people. This is their headline: "Come be buried with John Wayne and Kobe Bryant." I'm like, some of you are buried there, and so I know, no offense to you, but you got to have a little bit of little zeros behind your account to get in there. The cheapest plot, the one that you don't get an ocean view, which I don't know why you want an ocean view. You can't see it. $45,000 just to have that plot. For today, $45,000 for the worst, cheapest plot in Pacific View, and that doesn't even start to deal with the actual burial process. So again, I talk about inflation because some of you that have your plot there, you're like, I didn't pay $45,000. Inflation kicks in, and these plots continue to go up, and up. And there's insurance for that, right? And I won't get into all of that, but if you wanted to look into the route of buying sort of end-of-life insurance or burial insurance that locks you in with the current rate, and you don't get impacted by inflation, but obviously you're dealing with insurance then, so there's a lot of other things that I can't get into or I won't have time to get into. But that's another option just to look at to sort of avoid inflation. But here's all of them that are around. There's other Catholic ones out there, but I didn't put them on here, obviously. But here's options that you have, but the prices vary because they are private cemeteries, and it's not your average prices. Some of them are a lot higher. Some of them might be more in line with what you might see at the public cemeteries that we have around here. All right. Dealing with cemeteries, here's the other thing you got to realize. Scheduling. You got to be flexible because they're booked, right? And they'll give you slot options, and you got to be willing to say, hey, how can I make this work? You don't get to go to them and say, hey, here's my availability times. They're going to say, I don't care, because they're jammed up, sun up to sundown, and you got to be flexible with even when you schedule the funeral. When you will do the burial, will it be the same day, the interment, all of those things. They have busy schedules, and you got to be prepared for that. Grave markers or gravestone, it can be called that as well. That's another thing that, again, you're going to have to purchase that. There's a resource that's around here, they're based out of Dana Point, allheadstones.com. That's a reliable one that's local, but you're going to have to get a grave marker, right? And they start around $700. Right? You can get something probably a little fairly cheaper, or you can spend a lot of money, right? Get a headstone. You can get all that. I don't recommend all that. You get a nice flat grave marker. It's going to cost you probably $700 to $1,000, somewhere around in that range. But those are things that you're going to have to do dealing with cemeteries. Vaults. Vault liners, you got to consider that, and the reason you have a vault is because they're not just going to put the casket in the ground, because the ground can settle and it can cave in and all those things. So they have these concrete vaults that they will place the body in. If you've been to an interment or graveside service and you've gone there and you've seen, they will slide the casket on top of these ropes, and then they will lower it into the vault. They'll close the vault. They'll put the vault in the ground. The vault is this big concrete box that they will put it in. You got to purchase that. A lot of times that comes as part of the cemetery burial packages that you have. So you may not see this as a line item by itself, but it's within the packages. But ultimately, you will have to pay for that as well. All right, that's the last part. But let's because there's a lot of things that I've been throwing at you. But let's talk some numbers, right? Specifically, what does this look like? And again, I'm focusing more on the burial side of it. There's also the cremation has a different side. A lot of the same details, but obviously some different processes that they go through for that. So just looking at O'Connor, the nice thing about dealing with mortuaries, most of them have these plans, right? They don't make you deal with every little line item one by one. You can, but it might cost you a lot more money. You can have these burial plans that they will help you sort of catch everything that you need to catch without a few miscellaneous items that you still have to do on your own. But if you look at the burial plan right here, again, it's going to provide the funeral, or depending on what you do, it'll provide the hearse, it'll provide a utility vehicle that'll take flowers and all those things. It'll provide the care and the preparation, the embalming, all of those things that you don't have to be so concerned with. They'll provide that. So every mortuary has a page like this that they will give you pricing, right? Legally, they have to put majority of their pricing out there. They can't hide that from you because obviously they can use that to their advantage, and so there are laws in place where they're pretty transparent about the pricings that they have if you go online, most of these places. But I use O'Connor here, and I know these numbers are tiny. I'll send out this keynote, so you'll have it. It'll be on the website. But if you look at some of these, right, traditional funeral ceremony, visitation funeral ceremony, graveside ceremony. When I'm working with a family on this, typically, I'll lean more towards the funeral ceremony, graveside. But if you want to have visitation hours and all of those things, then you'll have to add the bigger packages. But the funeral ceremony for that bulk item gets us a lot of the things that we need to accomplish or we desire to accomplish with the funerals and the memorials that we have done here. But this doesn't have everything on it. So you look at that price and you're like, oh, that's not too bad. But you don't even have a casket, right? You got to get a casket, and so that's going to add on here. And remember, these are just prices I put in general terms as an example. You can spend a lot more money with a casket. You can't really get below $1,200. I mean, I guess you could find a way to, but not wise to. That's going to be your more conservative range for a casket, $1,200 to $3,000. You got a cemetery burial package, right? They have their own thing. So the mortuary has theirs. Well, they'll get the body all the way to the cemetery, and then they're hands off. They'll be there to help you, but you got to deal with the cemetery. And the cemetery, just like the mortuary, has a lot of their own burial packages. You don't have to necessarily get the vault and the vault liners and the plots and all of these details that you don't know much about. They spare you of all that and say, here's everything that's in a package, and here's what it costs. This was took this price point from El Toro Memorial, their latest one that they put out on the cheap end. Again, depending on the location of it, it can get you to that 5,700 range, 5,800, and then the higher end, which is a more desirable location, would be pushing 8,000. But that's your burial package. Other things that we got to conclude that we talked about is the floral arrangements. Again, from the memorial, the funeral, the floral arrangements that'll be around, that'll be on the casket, all of those things you got to consider. And so, yeah, you can go on the lower end of this, and really you can get a bouquet of flowers and spend $50 and call it a day. You could, but again, I want you to think about these and say, like, what is going to be good for my family that I'm leaving behind, as I think about the things that I want to pay for and want to have included. Floral arrangements. Gravestone, we mentioned that, right? $700 to $1,000 is a thick, piece of material that you're placing there, so it's not cheap. It's not gonna, you're not gonna find it for lower than that in the state of California. In other areas, again, California is more expensive with almost everything, so even gravestones, grave markers are more costly out here. A whole funeral is more costly out here than it might be in a different state. Reception, you got to think about that, right? You want to be able to provide a reception. Oftentimes when we have it here, we'll have a memorial, have a funeral, the interment. If it's right after, we might go do an interment and then come back here and have a reception, or have a reception right after and then go do the interment with the close family afterwards. But you got to think about a reception, right? What you're going to cater food in. What are you going to do to provide just that time of fellowship and just time of grieving with your family, extended family, and friends? Facility rental. You got to consider that. Again, one of the blessings that we try to provide for families here that are part of our church is we want to provide a room for you if you are a highly committed participant here at Compass Bible Church, or have a loved one. Then we try to make accommodations to say we want to relieve you of that, trying to find a room. We'll do it right here in this room. We'll do it in the main auditorium. We'll do it in 120 East, depending on the size of how many people you're expecting. And so I put an asterisk by that just because some of that can be taken care of here. If this is your church home, you might want to consider a videographer or a photographer. Some people have that, and that's going to cost you. And then I alluded to this before: is if the body is transported out of state or out of area, and it's somewhere else, well, that's going to hike up your price a lot, right? Because you got to get it on a plane, or you got to travel wherever it is. Another mortuary might have to be involved on the back end to receive the body and deal with it there. So that's a lot. Well, let's be specific with the numbers. Let's just say we were to take this funeral ceremony. You can't see it, but that number is $6,425, right? $6,425. If we're going to take this funeral ceremony, which gives you professional service, transfer of the deceased, care and preparation, embalming, funeral at the venue of choice. That means we're going somewhere else, right? Graveside ceremony the same day. Hopefully that's a good thing. If we can make that happen, you get a hearse, you get a utility vehicle. So that's the package that you have. We're going to do it. Let's just say we're going to do it here at Compass Bible Church. So now we're going to start with $6,400, right? 25. That's going to be our our plan that we're going to go with. So we're at O'Connor. That's the plan we're going to go with. So there's our number right there. Well, then, let's just say we get a casket. And again, I'm not telling you need to break the bank, but you should consider a decent casket. Let's just, on the conservative end, you can go all the way up to $10,000. I don't recommend it, but let's just say $1,500. We're going to spend $1,500 on a casket. Cemetery burial package, let's just put a number right in the middle of that and just say $6,000, right? We're not going to be in the slums of the cemetery, but we're not going to be, in the ritzy area either. We're just going to kind of be middle of the road, and we're going to say $6,000 is where you're going to be buried. Well, flowers, again, there's an assortment of floral arrangements that you can have. You can get a lot more expensive. I got very conservative here and said, let's just say $400. We're going to go $400. You got somebody within the church that's willing to bless you and say, hey, I'll do it at a discounted rate. Let's just say that's $400. Or you got to get a gravestone, grave marker for your plot. And it's going to run you about $1,000. You can spend more. You can probably find it cheaper, but let's just meet at $1,000, and then reception, catering, Chick-fil-A sandwiches, $750, right, for however many people you're going to bring in, right? You can do a lot more. You can make it nicer. You can we recommend for some families, hey, just go to Costco, right? They can get some sandwiches, some chips, and some salad. You can do this really cheap, but at the same time have a chance for your family members to come together and grieve and have a good time of right after, just caring for one another and being able to share fond memories and stories just to help during that time. Recommend that. Well, all of that together is going to get us $16,000, right? And so you see, from that standpoint of starting to think about that now, starting to put money away now, starting to save now, to say, this is one person, $16,000, and I'm missing some things on here, right? It's not everything. There's always miscellaneous costs that come in here, and this is more of the conservative. So, and the number is continuing to increase. And so as you think about, from the standpoint of when death occurs and what to plan for, these are things that, can you start doing that today? If you haven't, can we start putting away $100 a month or $200 a month, whatever you can do, $50 a month? Can you start doing that to try to absorb some of these costs so your family is not overwhelmed with this when they're dealing with your loss or loss of a loved one, and then on top of that, it becomes a financial burden, right? When you have the wills and your trusts and those things, they can factor into this, but you having a dedicated savings that's allocated just for this helps your family out a lot. So we want to keep thinking about these things. This is a good thing to think about. I know some of this can be overwhelming, right? You're probably like, I don't even know where to start. Just start, right? Just start and take these things that we're trying to put in front of you to say, what can I start doing today? How can I start to sacrifice some of the things that I'm doing today that's going to be a blessing to my family when they have to deal with losing me? Because that's going to be tough. That's going to be really hard. Emotionally, it's going to be hard in some cases. Spiritually, it's going to be hard. Physically, it's just going to be hard. There's a lot of demands that happen, and a big blessing to your family, your loved ones that you leave behind, is that you took the time to think about this and plan ahead, and that's just going to alleviate a lot of things for them. But I'll end with this. Here's the beauty about all of this is if Jesus comes back, you don't have to worry about it. So you can pray Maranatha, but as Pastor Mike said, every generation has thought that, right? So we can think that and we can be silly and just say, I'm not going to do any of this, or we can actually be wise and say, hey, if he comes back, that all the greater, right? But if he doesn't and you pass away, which we all will, at least we've thought about this. If at least you've put your family in a better situation as they have to deal with your loss or the loss of a loved one, you've thought about these things. So the hope that we have, of course, is that Jesus has died on the cross for our sins, and death doesn't scare us. And so I'm so glad that all of you are here because we can talk about these things. The sting of death is no more. We don't have that, but there are some things that we need to talk about that are going to help us be in better positions. Thinking about it now, that's going to help our loved ones later. So Hopefully this was a good help to you. We got one more session as Pastor Lucas will take us through what it looks like actually to start to plan for for a memorial and a funeral, and then going to the cemetery, what that looks like at the interment, and dealing with grieving. Some of you are going to have to help someone through the grieving process, and it'd be good for you to really know those stages of grief and all the things that are dealt with within that period of time that people go through. And so hang in there for that one, and it'll be a good one, I trust. And then we'll have our final session next Sunday evening with Pastor Michael. We'll have all of some preset questions that we'll talk through, and then some live Q&A that you'll be able to ask some questions, and we'll talk through it as well. So appreciate all of you being here. It's a joy to us to know that we have a church that cares about these things, that wants to deal with these things, that wants to be prepared because you love your loved ones and you want to think wisely about them. And so this is a joy to all of us as pastors and leaders to have you here. So let me pray, and then I will dismiss you. God, I want to start off by saying, as I just alluded to, that we are so grateful that you sent your son, Jesus. Lord, what a joy it is to know that whether life ends today, tomorrow, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, Lord, that the second that this life ends, when we take our last breath, if we are a believer, we place our faith in Jesus Christ and repented from our sins, that after our last breath, we will be with Jesus for eternity. Lord, we all have to go through this portal of death, and we don't have to fear it because Jesus took that sting away. We just have to look at it and say, this is a part in our life that must happen in order for us to spend eternity with you. And so we look forward to that day, but in the meantime, Lord, I pray that we would think wisely about these decisions. And while the rest of the world will try to move it aside or act like death isn't going to occur, Lord, I'm thankful that we can look at it and say, how can we plan well and how can we glorify you through this? And so help us to do that, Lord. I pray that just even in the discussions that many will have here after this and even moving forward, that you would give wisdom, you would give discernment. These are a lot of heavy decisions, but Lord, our aim and goal is to seek first the kingdom of God, and we want to glorify you in all that we do. So I pray that you would help us all do that as we take this seriously. So thank you for the series. Thank you that you put it on our hearts to do, and I just pray that you would be pleased with the decisions, the updates, the changes that will be made here, or even just the enlightenment that we all have of the things that we need to think about. So thank you for this church. Thank you for all those that attended here this morning, and I just pray that you would be glorified in our lives and all that we do and all that we say. In Jesus' name, amen.